Struggler season is so back. Chapter 3. 81 felt like the proper return of Berserk, after a string of chapters that were more filler than killer. Ever since the destruction of Elfhelm, things have been looking bleak for our protagonists and the world at large. But as long as they got to safety, they would find a way to deal with Griffith. That's what we used to think. Right up until the moment where Daiba proclaimed guts to be the source of all of Kushan's misfortunes. And we don't know what to think anymore. Well, that's only half true, because we do have some thoughts on what's coming in the next chapter. So without further ado, these are our predictions of Berserk Chapter 382, explained. Sacrificed at last, but why and how? If you haven't seen our video breaking down Chapter 381, then you really need to, because otherwise you'll miss out on crucial context. There, we discussed how Daiba was probably planning to betray his Kushan allies from the moment he escaped Falconia, because ultimately, siding with Griffith will give him his heart's desire. Daiba wants nothing more than a kingdom of magic where all sorts of arcane arts can be practiced without restriction or judgment. In fact, when he meets the Elfhelm Magi, he thinks to himself that their martial potential under him could be immense, and he tells Silat that they're well versed in the dark arts. Any man who views magic as a vehicle for evil should not be trusted, but Daiba saved Erika's life, so we had to cut him some slack for a while. Having said that, any man Guts directly compares to an apostle is dangerous at best, and homicidal at worst, and it looks like we're about to discover which one Daiba is. In Chapter 381, he framed Guts as being the source of the surprise attack by Rakshas. This makes a certain amount of sense to anyone who isn't familiar with the brand of sacrifice, but no sense to us, because we know that Brand can't summon a friggin' astral gate or bring an apostle back to life. Those are things that can only be done by someone with deep knowledge of the abyssal side of the astral world, and no one knows more about the abyss than Daiba. He is a man who worked alongside an apostle for several decades. He harnessed the power of the abyss to create his man-made Behelit and several demon soldiers. Daiba should have known exactly what was causing all that mayhem, and yet he chose to frame Guts. Perhaps that's because Guts brought a Behelit with him. We've been wondering what will happen to Guts' Behelit since the 90s. He's had it by his side for as long as we've known him, and it has never been clear just who this Behelit belongs to. Flora told Guts she wished it left his hand, because even she wasn't clear whether it was his or not. Well, as the person who gave Emperor Ganishka his Behelit, Daiba will have a better answer than her, but whether that answer is good for Guts or not is the question. Right now, Daiba is leading the Black Swordsman into the forest to presumably chain him up and leave him there. That's what the new Kushan Emperor has ordered him to do, but we don't think he'll obey the Emperor's command like the Emperor thinks he will. Daiba has already outsmarted the likes of Silat, a man who was aware he wasn't to be trusted, and yet had no choice but to trust him thanks to his magical expertise. So what is he going to do with Guts? If you ask us, there's one of three things happening to the Black Swordsman in the next chapter. The first is that he's actually just chained up and left to die in a deep part of the Kushan forests. Daiba is most likely working with Griffith in some capacity, and Guts is Griffith's largest obstacle to victory. If he can eliminate him safely, Daiba will take every opportunity to do just that. The second is that he kills Guts, because he knows damn well that killing him won't cause a major astral event. Sacrifices are meant to die during sacrificial rituals anyway. The worst thing that can happen when he kills Guts is that he witnesses the souls of the damned dragging him to hell, seeing as that's his ultimate destination. Or, and this is the prospect that scares us most, he forces Guts to use the Behelit. One thing that doesn't add up at all for us is how in the hell did an astral gate open up in the Kushan capital? To pull off such a high-level magical feat, one requires immense knowledge of the astral world and a certain key. Astral gates only descend upon the earth when a Behelit is activated, or if the layers between the physical and astral worlds become so thin that a God Hand member can exert their direct influence over the region. That's what happened during the Qliphoth mini-arc, where Slan decided to bring her region of darkness to the physical world just to meet Guts again. Right now, Guts' Behelit is not with him. The Kushan stripped him of his weapons and armor when they threw him in jail. It's not with Puck either, who has abandoned Betchy in favour of his new best friend Isidro. It's most likely with Daiba, and When the Paramarishi Senani is giving the Kurultai his false reasons for imprisoning Guts, Silat thinks back to his man-made Behelit and how he neglected to mention his role in Ganishka's tyranny. In our opinion, it's very likely that Daiba plans on finishing the job that was started during Griffith's eclipse, probably because he now knows there is no way to stand up to a god hand. Several magic users in Berserk tend to avoid clashing with divine figures precisely because they're divine. Shrika herself was shocked that Guts was on a journey to take down the 5 angels, and she considered his task to be foolish, because she could never imagine herself or any other magic user doing such an unnatural thing. When Daiba first came into Berserk, he immediately recognized Guts and Serpico's magic type, because he prays to Durga and Vayu, madness and the wind, day and night. If Daiba can figure out what kind of magic they were using after a single exchange, it's not a leap of the imagination to think he has already mentally submitted to Griffith, seeing as he'd be Durga incarnate in a way. Griffith is a god hand on earth. That makes him the absolute being, and Daiba knows this. He can either resist this absolute being by channeling arcane power from the swells within which he was born, or he can ally with him and bring his personal dream to life. When Guts and his team defeated Daiba's Kundalini, his first reaction wasn't that he lost a key battle for Ganishka. It was that he would no longer have the opportunity to establish his magical kingdom. He knew that that defeat had tainted him in the Dread Emperor's eyes, so he might be trying to curry favour with the new Emperor of mankind. There is no doubt in our minds that Griffith is angling for the title of Gaiseric II, so to reach that goal, he has to take out everyone that knows he's actually the void of this cycle. Expect Chapter 382 to open up on some deep chasm or a similar geological feature where Daiba will offer Guts a deal. He will end his suffering, but in exchange, he will take his powers. He knows how useful the Berserker armor can be, and besides, if he can enslave Guts to his will entirely, that'll be the best case scenario for him. That way, Daiba gains an unstoppable, rabid attack dog, but he has to be careful. The next time Guts uses the armor will probably be the last time he uses it, seeing as his Beast of Darkness is now loose. So the Paramarishi Senani is playing with forces that he doesn't quite understand, and that's Guts' only silver lining. Well, that, and the fact that he has really dependable comrades, some of whom are about to come of age in the most poignant way imaginable. The first kill of Isidro the Swordsman. Right now, there are 2 groups tailing Daiba's Harashada as they escort Guts to his prison. The first is Silat and his Tapasa. Silat has been suspicious of Daiba ever since he saw him hiding out in Falconia, because he knows the guy, and he knows Daiba doesn't do anything that doesn't benefit Daiba. When the Wizard General explained the situation of the world to the Kurultai Council, he conveniently skipped out on mentioning his own involvement with Ganishka. He didn't tell them about his man-made Behelit, or the fact that Ganishka is the world twin tree today because he took an unsupervised dip into the man-made Behelit. Daiba is just as responsible for the world of Fantasia as Griffith, Ganishka and Skull Knight, but the difference here is Fantasia is what he's always wanted, a world of magic with his kingdom ruling over all magi. That's the dream Daiba wants to realise, and Silat is picking up on this fact slowly but surely. As soon as he realised Daiba was angling to become the new Emperor's right hand, he stepped forward and demanded the post of the Supreme General, and was one of the last people to see him alive. And if that is true, then Silat's call to follow him into the jungles might just save more than Guts' life. The last time Silat chose to follow his own lead, he witnessed the end of the world of reason, the birth of Ganishka's Shiva form, and realised that neither he nor Griffith were good for the world. And Silat is a man who champions goodness now. He fights in the light, and he already suspects Daiba is up to something incredibly dark. When he hears the Wizard General's tale about the brand and its power to attract evil, Silat's first thought is that Guts is no longer a worthwhile war asset. This tells us that he was planning on getting Guts back into top fighting shape, physically and mentally, because he knows just how much damage the guy can do on a personal level. But then his thoughts go back to the man-made Behelit, and he wonders, what if Daiba is lying yet again? The young master makes the decision to take his Tapasa and tail the Harashada, so he can see Daiba's imprisonment strategy himself, and in doing so, he already has some of the physically strongest men in Berserk on standby for a rescue. But he won't be alone in the endeavour, because the Harishada are also being tailed by Isidro. Isidro is on an interesting character arc right about now. He was planning on ditching the group and going to look for Isma himself when the trolls attacked the Kushan capital. His morality and backup from Azan changed his mind, and he ended up assisting with the defence of the capital. But he also witnessed the Harishada bewitching and carrying Guts into the council chamber. When Isidro enters said chamber, he calls out Daiba for trying to mess with Guts, and when he's shut down and nearly thrown out of the joint, he decides to rescue his idol like he rescued Casca in the past. Isidro and Puck are following the Harishada into the forest, and once they see what Daiba's planning for Guts, there's a real possibility Isidro will kill the boy within him and let the man be born. Before the destruction of Elfhelm, he was hesitant in battles against humans because he has slain many spirits and monsters, but he has never killed a man of his own volition. A major attribute of his character is his unwillingness to make that ultimate commitment, because a true swordsman knows that on the field, it's his life against that of his enemies. Before setting sail for Elfhelm, Isidro was a decent swordsman, but not a true one. However, that has changed, seeing as he was more than willing to knock Kushan's soldiers overboard when they started boarding the seahorse. If he notices the Harishada are trying to kill his idol, Isidro might finally get over his mental block, because he will be killing to save a life, not killing just for the sake of it. To be completely honest with you guys, this is something we've been waiting for ever since he first showed up in chapter 133, and we're pretty sure the kid is tired of Puck being more assertive than him during a fight. As much as he's annoyed by the elf, Isidro doesn't take his advice for granted, because Puck has saved him from death on many occasions by calling out plays. Now that they're on the same page with regards to fighting for what's precious to them, he will be a lot more assertive himself. And let's not forget, the first thing Puck does after the trolls are dealt with is fly to Guts' cell to check up on him. The emotional bond between the master, his student, and their favourite elf is thicker than blood. And right now, we're counting on this stone-throwing thief to steal Guts away from the jaws of fate. And while Isidro and Silat are working on rescuing Guts, the rest of their companions are gathered around the one person who can give them a magical edge over Daiba. And no, we're not talking about Elfhelm's great gurus, at least not directly. The return of Shrieker and the Casca rescue mission. Towards the end of chapter 381, we had a depressing realization. While Studio Gaga and Koji Mori have done justice to Miura-sensei's memory by keeping his masterpiece alive, they've made Morda's bosom less buxom, and that's a crime that deserves capital punishment. But jokes aside, it's something Morda says as 381 closes that gives us hope for Guts and Casca. She looks at Shrieker, who's still in her death-like trance, and comments that she's still wandering the astral world despite such commotion occurring where her physical body lies. Morda then calls Shrieker cheeky, as if she knows something we don't. We then see Great Guru Ginnar the Ponderous ask her about dinner, and she replies that he just ate, just like Danon used to before she was trapped within the astral world. This is a seemingly insignificant exchange if you read chapter 381 in isolation. But when you also factor in chapter 380, you realise that apart from Guts, who saw her briefly at the beginning of 376, Morda is probably the only other person who's made contact with Shrieker since she entered her death trance. Morda became Shrieker's bestie from Elfhelm when she took her flying on her broom, and the pair has a certain rebelliousness to them that the other Magi lack. Shrieker knows that Elfhelm's mages won't understand a battle strategy if she explained it to them in detail, but she also knows that Morda's thinking aligns with her group's quite a bit. She's been by Shrieker's side all day and night ever since they reached the Kushan capital, and chapter 380 ended in a way that was sort of confusing. The final couple of pages zoomed in on Shrieker and Morda, and we saw Shrieker's astral body leaving the Kushan capital, looking back for a second, and then zoning in on Falconia's location. Within a second, her astral body arrives at the outskirts of Griffith city, and Shrieker promises herself and us that she will find Miss Casca. That's just Best Girl Shrieker doing Best Girl behaviour, but it's the narrator's closing statements that link chapters 380 and 381. The narrator doesn't tell us her thoughts remain in distant Falconia, or return to distant Falconia. The narrator says her thoughts now turn to distant Falconia. It's a small detail, but it's one that makes all the difference, because it implies that Shrieker found Falconia but returned to the Kushan capital to help out her friends. She might have even had a conversation with Morda before going back into her trance, because the art style of her lying in bed from 380 looks more like an invocation design rather than a continuation design. If that is true, then Morda and Shrika are working together and secretly formulating the Casca rescue mission, which is extremely wise considering the betrayal we just witnessed, given that the manga chose to remind us of Morda and the Elfhelm mages before closing 381 out with Guts being led into the woods. We'd say that something's brewing on the back end that can change the entire game in the blink of an eye. We wouldn't be surprised if the next chapter opened with Shrika within the Falcon's castle, because at this point, Berserk has two clear narrative pathways. The first is whatever's going to happen to Guts, which we will likely discover in a couple of weeks when chapter 382 is published. And the second is Shrika's mission to Falconia, whose success will determine what kind of mindset Guts has for the end game. Rescuing Casca is of paramount importance because without her, Guts has given in to despair in a way he didn't after he was molested as a child. He welcomed death for the first time in his life as he lowered his neck for Rakshas before the apostle was killed by Silat. Despair is a powerful emotion required to activate a Behelit, which is why we suspect that's Daiba's plan for him. But the only people capable of countering that, or any other magical plans involving Guts, are the Elfhelm Magi's, specifically the great gurus who aren't complacent, and Morda. Chapter 382 might not focus entirely on Shrika's mission, but we expect it to be a big part of it, because right now, things are ramping up at a pace we've never seen Berserk assume. And if someone can rescue Casca from the Falcon's castle without triggering World War Z, it's Shrika. We suspect the team that goes into Falconia will look and feel a lot like the team that went in to rescue Griffith from Midland. Only this time, their rescue attempt will have to be pulled off without heavyweights like Guts and Pippin. Arcana is a subtle art and requires a deft hand to execute it. Right now, Guts can't even wield Dragon Slayer without strapping it to himself, let alone perform subtle maneuvers. Shrika and Morda are ideal candidates because they're clever enough to execute insane strategies without fearing for their lives. And these two ladies might just be able to get their woman on the inside to help them out. Shrika has a prophecy of her own waiting for her in Falconia. When she parted ways with Sonia at Vritanis, the former prophesied that the kite and the owl would meet again. And Sonia might be wrong about a lot of things when she's conscious, but her prophecies never miss the mark. If Shrika and Morda can convince their respective targets to cooperate with them without question, it will change the face of magic in Berserk as we know it. Good will become more powerful than evil for the first time in a millennium, and that's when the real final battle begins. Marvelous verdict. But for now, that's all we've got for you with regards to our predictions for Chapter 382. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section and tell us what you'd like to see happen. Like this video, share it with your fellow Berserkers, and subscribe to Marvelous Anime to take full advantage of Struggler Season. We'll see you guys in the next one, so until then, stay safe and remember, keep struggling, strugglers. We're drawing closer to the end.